accusations that were made. In fact, they're making these types of claims are misleading and are. My office responded to this letter from the governor's office. As I've referenced this possession of marijuana of 4.6 grams in 20, and that amended the legal definition that it became difficult, if not impossible, for us to differentiate today are memorandums and news articles to prosecute under 20 grams of marijuana necessary to go forward. Also included in that amounts of cannabis they would be testing. And a policy of non-prosecution by my office, as has been claimed everywhere. However, the governor and the senator chose to that the governor himself signed. History. Now, upon my review, it's important to note that with a very violent past, what I can tell you that among them were two vehicle broke into a vehicle that left in the third degree, where he was stole the vehicle, but he was charged with grand theft in the third degree. Moses's juvenile history. In your packets today, you'll receive copies of all of the police reports available to the public. What's important to understand who held the firearm during that robbery. It's important because facts do matter. And it's important felonies in Mr. Moses's history. Again, all of those happened. I stand behind the decisions that were made. Offenses would have incarcerated Mr. Moses for life. That would have required or even justified prosecutors. We uphold the law. Cases that we believe can be proven of Mr. Moses's prior cases, and I'd like to yesterday. The reality is that legislation so that we reduce the likelihoods, not just here in Central Florida, but across our country, as that too will likely increase mass shootings in the future. For information, I am providing request. However, as to the very last felony or had violated the terms of their probation, it is unrealistic for the information requested to be provided. Case, we would then need to determine if the individual arrest. We'd essentially be looking at more than $3,000. Now, however, it is not feasible for us to do an audit of this and has, within the time frame provided, pulled together a spreadsheet. Administration, there were approximately 30 no build or no pros, those are all technical terms for. There were 33,278,441 cases dropped here in Orange County. If you look at Osceola County, 100 cases. Under Ayala, 7,900 cases. Of Orange and Osceola, under Lamar, 103,000, 6,000 cases. If you look at the percentages, 8% under Ayala and 43% in the 2 years that I have been state attorney. Why cases get dropped? Cases get dropped for many reasons. And what I mean by that is the standard for law enforcement to make an arrest probably committed that crime. By the time that means that we have to prove that the individual who is arrested committed across the administrations and a reasonable doubt. So what's the reason? Some are no longer willing to testify by the time behind dismissing cases, talking about how many arrests someone has. And it's problematic because arrests and convictions cannot be guilty. Is the prosecutor's office also responsible for that? By the court that is different and less than the plea. Submit to you that we are not. I would submit to you that one of those components is the prosecutor. Their system is flawed. And to try to place those based in politics alone. And the men and women on them, and it's not right. Want to learn valuable lessons from this heartbreaking event to deter your office's failure to properly administer justice. Our legislative delegation, a proposal, I am pleased to say that that bill has now Representative Bracy Davis care enough to reach out to the family of actually help us to prevent this from happening in the future. All too often we have things that happen when needed to properly address whatever offenses are committed. If we could keep them longer, we could invest resources into our juvenile justice system. It's a matter of if they will get out, it's a matter of when they will. The nation that incarcerates more people than anywhere in the world that we can use to provide community safety. Other things that will help reduce violent crime, enact laws, and put resources into the department. I also want to point Minister of Justice. If the governor's intention selectively solicited information in this matter from my office, misstep in failing to test the firearm for DNA, that case prosecuted, then his deputy should and presented charges for prosecution to my office. But the governor said that he was interested on that failure from the sheriff's office. Another mass shooting took place right up the road, similar to this. Yet they're very clear. It is not my intention to bring attention to prevent that incident from happening. That I'm curious as to why he's been silent. The only logical conclusion is that he is not politically aligned with his philosophies. In my remarks, I want to say that I don't prosecute cases, that we don't do. I've recently been asked to explain why accusations about things that we don't prosecute. Last, seek minimum mandatory sentences on drug cases. Prosecutes, then certainly it's going to in their entirety. Look at the work that we do, it's an entirety. Facts matter. It is our job that should be filed, and whether or not we can meet, and we are obligated by law to not go forward. In 2021, by a convicted felon, 22 of those cases by plea. 54 of those cases, of the 12 cases dismissed, 11 of them, we have to follow the law. So when you have a possession of a firearm, there were several occupants in the vehicle, and in those cases where we do not receive evidence burden to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. In a case beyond a reasonable doubt, there are certain elements that we must prove beyond. 6 of those were dismissed because there were motions, a legal basis to dismiss those cases because of then we assessed that the motion to dismiss was valid, that were legally insufficient. Again, 27 of those, 4 of those cases were illegal search and seizure. The defendant had a prior conviction to make him in possession. There were witness issues. One of those cases resulted in a fine, and 2 of them were for miscellaneous. The point that I'm making is that it's easy to stand on the outside and say, though, is that there are reasons why. Followed, we have to dismiss those cases from the Orlando Police Department. And he expressed, and I went over them with him, and I explained, so let's work together so that we can fix that, so that we can build better cases. That is a partnership. Can we fix this? What is the solution? Here is the problem. We can work better together for the safety of this community. The work being done by the prosecutors and our sympathies remain with the families who have been impacted, and we will continue to work for the people to resources so that we can fight for justice, and we hope to work. Keisha will help field questions.
Jason from West 2. Any decision about
And what we do is that when the individual a memo and there is a panel that reviews that memo, and then the panel votes, and then the result of that vote.
You don't know if you are in favor of that, Fran?
Arrest in 2021 and why the gun that was found.
We didn't, but you all did. And I found that last week.
Obviously, good news in terms of the bill for that kind of address that directly with the governor.
You know, thank you for asking that, because this has become a widely published legislation. So I will continue to push, but I'm also willing to get out of the way if my.
Channel 2 also. Something that we're looking at is how Orange County's task that money spent to ensure that this doesn't even reach you.
I would like to boot camp program. And what they do is that when people have rightly aged out of juvenile justice, right, like I said, the problems that we face are not a matter of if there was direct filed to adult court, and get to the root cause of why is this happening and what can we collectively as a community to discover what can we do then. Come here.
Thank you, Marley. Jetu?
This case in your contact with them, did any of them express to you how they felt about the governor's letter, and also
to the office yet to discuss the resolution of the case in the press conference? I don't really want to get into the personal nature of the discussion.
With Trago from Univision, you talk a little bit about why didn't happen in this case.
Was sent to adult court, and that didn't fix the problem either. So pendulum all the way to the other side. Justice is balanced, and we do differently. And I submit that my juvenile justice proposal.
With News 6, there's been several hearings for Keith Moses' current case. And
The talk about juvenile cases brings. Did that ever go to adult court? Was it handled in the juvenile system?
So,
adult court. You could have said that, though, right?
Yes. Of sending a 10-year-old child to adult court.
National news again. Given, in light of the conversation you had, just for our audience knowledge, do you guys normally meet up and discuss issues, do a little bit more work, legally speaking?
So yes, meet up to discuss several issues, and many of them had already been working on their own proposals on what.
Questions? Yes, sir.
David Police, Fox 35, law to help make more prosecutions.
So goes through the juvenile justice process, so in how long a child remains in a program. And what is important is because it removes the child from involved in some sort of gun activity or gang activity, because we are to break those connections. However, if we can retain and we have more time to kind of deprogram them from juvenile probation, one of the things that happens is when a juvenile, and if we don't catch up to them until they're about to age out, is also to toll probation, meaning that it will stop until they return. Actions would be.
Any more questions?
Right, so it takes some time to get through it. There hasn't been enough time. Cases that maybe those cases could have been done better.
If we worked with law enforcement to train them, those cases was similar to what I read off that I found in the Orange County Sheriff's Office. We don't know who had the gun, and sometimes we would just charge them. So we've got to have more. A lot of times if we his car, then depending on what time or when the car come forward and say, that was my firearm. And the important thing that I can say today, it's not a matter of who's doing something wrong, that they need to look beyond probable cause into
that there should be convictions in these cases. When we looked at to be behind bars, there is that mandatory minimum of 3 years if you can prove.
I don't stand with them that the means justifies the end. Be taken off the street, that we obtain that conviction with the law. So I do want to work with them so that we can build better kick. That's not what the law says, and we're going to follow the law.
What about the
mandatory minimums? And I showed you that we do. The mandatory minimum is going to be waived. A supervisor must approve that way. All of the components of what it takes to approve in my office. And this isn't just here, it's across the entire state of Florida. 20-something years ago, you had people who would hire supervisor approval so that I can get another set of eyes on it to make sure if a gun was found and the individual wasn't using the gun. In a case about a year or so ago where someone went on board at that time, the individual, the prosecutor was the right call. And I stand behind that call because while commit a dangerous crime, and it does happen to us by law enforcement and prosecute the cases that we can. Now, factors that we use to determine, one, what the sentence will be, two, included a case where in a parking lot to find the vehicle. And you know, we couldn't prosecute that case because that was a search and seizure violation, and it didn't exist in that case. So I know that they were disappointed partners, so that those sort of things don't happen, so that they won't be, and I want to continue extending myself as a partner in that regard.
The age to buy guns and to carry guns without
Are stolen guns, and because there is just used in crimes. So we've got to do something to reduce, so they have to go get a gun. And now this guy has to get a gun in his of road rage, right? You cut me off, I don't like it. I see a lot of vigilante justice where people put themselves in a position of get responsible gun legislation. We're going to continue to see gun violence in our communities.
So they think about your job is a risk?
Yes. So it became very apparent to me wrong. Not because I wasn't following the law, not because we weren't and that risk is ever present. The last bulleted item in his inquiry was that the governor's office has been interviewing local law enforcement against me, that they are interviewing people who leave my office to find out if they're execution. However, I will point out that in your press packets, you're sued. So this isn't about whether or not I follow the law, wanting to control the politics across this state. And
thank you. I'll be on the side with press packets.